When I was in high school, if they would have voted on who was the least likely to succeed, that was me. And if you're scared right now about your future, your job, AI, or what's coming, I need you to hear my story. Because if I could change my trajectory, I promise you can change yours. My next door neighbor, his name was Chris. I said, Chris, where are you going? He says, I'm going to football practice. I asked my dad, Dad, can I play football? And in seventh grade, I started playing football. And it was amazing because I saw all of these young men that were the cool kids. And when I went to school, a lot of them were smoking marijuana. And I knew that they were going to ask me about smoking. And when the time came and they asked me, I went and smoked. I didn't get high the first time I did it, but I'll never forget. I was walking down the hall in junior high school and I was pretending like I was stoned. I was walking into a Valentine's Day dance, and the person at the front of the Valentine's Day dance was the principal of the school. The principal saw me fake staggering down the hallway, and he said, can you stand right there? The very first time marijuana touched my lips, I got caught by the principal of the school. I went on and I smoked it throughout high school. I barely graduated from high school. I skipped a third of my senior year, and my mother said to me, crying and angry at the same time, my first kid, you better graduate. It was the last day of school. Everybody else was skipping school, but I had to be there that very last day at that international relations class. Otherwise, I was not going to pass. I made it through high school. Now I was depressed because I had no future. I didn't know where I was going to go and what I was going to do. My father and mother got divorced when I was 18. My father was putting himself back together with seminars, and he almost mandated that I went to this seminar with this man named Norman Vincent Peale. And this man had written a famous book at the time called The Power of Positive Thinking. My dad was shocked when I said, Dad, can we go again the next day? We went to him again the next day. Now, at this time, my father was also going to these seminars. One was called EST, that later became Landmark Forum. Another one was called Insight Seminar. He also turned me on to the Johnson O'Connor Research Foundation, and these four experiences had a tremendous effect on the trajectory of my existence. But I was still drinking, I was still smoking marijuana, and at one point I got into trouble. I remember I wrecked my mom's car and wrecked her car into another car and wrecked her car into another car. And at that point, I was an expediter for a plumbing company. And I came in late that morning, and I had a concert I was going to go to that evening. And one of the plumbers said that you'll be late tomorrow, won't you? I said, no, I will be on time. That night I drank too much alcohol at the concert. And then when I got up the next morning, I was late. And that morning I decided to quit drinking alcohol. Now, I didn't have to hit rock bottom, but what I knew is that there was alcoholism in my family. My dad's brother was an alcoholic. My dad's dad was an alcoholic. There was alcoholism in my mom's side of the family, and I could see the foresight. I had the ability to see if I stay on this path, I am going to ruin my life. I had friends that were on the same path as me, and one of them ended up dying about 10 years ago, and another one is still on the same path, but barely. And at that moment, I made three key decisions. And one decision was to master my emotions. I made that decision because I was identified as having a bad temper. And I knew that this temper was going to have an effect on the rest of my life. I made a decision to take care of my body. This was my vessel through my experience. I was going to take care of it. And I also made a decision to be a nonstop learner. I think one of the reasons why I made that decision is because I felt inferior because I put zero effort into high school. And then fortunately, I got accepted in the Plumbers and Pipe Fitters Union. And when I got in there, I had this incredible discipline. Now, when my father took me to Dr. Norman Vincent Peale, I started reading these books by Og Mandino, and they said, practice this every day for 90 days. So I did it for 90 days. They said, it will change your life. And one of the things it said is always go the extra mile. So I said, okay, this sounds good. Let's see if it works. And this principle is called proving things out. So I went to work early and the boss noticed me. I stayed late and the boss noticed me. I stayed engaged all day long and the boss noticed me. When they laid off other people, they kept me. And what I learned is that when you always go the extra mile, you become more valuable. And people judge by contrast. Most human beings take the path of least resistance. So now I'm in the Plumbers and Pipe Fitters Union in Alaska, and I'm traveling all over that beautiful state. Kodiak, Alaska, with the biggest grizzly bears on the planet. Shimia, Alaska, 2 miles wide by 4 miles long, closer to mainland Russia than it is mainland USA. Adak, Alaska, King Salmon, Alaska, Valdez, Alaska, the Prudhoe Bay, the curvature of the earth. I was able to witness so much of that beautiful state, but I also had this Zen discipline because I was completely sober. And all I did when I worked is I worked incredibly hard. Every evening I would read books and I would learn, and I would work out and eat the perfect food. And I started learning about motivational speakers and professional training because my father introduced me to these motivational speakers as a young man. I had a couple moments in high school where they would chant my name playing sports, or a couple moments where I'd have these applauses that had an effect on how I felt. At one point, my dad acknowledged me public speaking at a pep rally. All of these things had an effect on me. And then I joined Toastmasters while I was in the Plumbers and Pipe Fitters Union. Now, in case you don't know what Toastmasters is, it's a public speaking organization that teaches you how to speak in public. And there's successive levels of it. And I became the highest level, called a DTM, for Distinguished Toastmaster. And I won some regional speech contests. And I was preparing myself without me even knowing it for my future. When I was learning nonstop, back then we had these things called books, and then we had these things called cassettes, and then we had these things called CDs. And there was these companies called Nightingale Conant, and I would just listen to information over and over. And an author that I loved back then, one of the many, was Brian Tracy. He had written a famous book called The Psychology of Sales. And I had tremendous respect for this man. And he said, if you want to change your life, every day, write down who you want to be. And this is one of the most powerful things you could do to change your life. I did this for 10 years. I would go to the bookstore and buy the nicest book I could. And I'd write about 20 aspects of what I wanted to be as a human being. And what I didn't know at the time that I know now is I was changing the way I identified. I work harder on myself than anybody could possibly imagine. I am a master of my emotions. I only talk good about people behind their back. I'm a master of acceptance. And I'd write these things that I wanted to be as a human being with incredible discipline. Every single day, first thing in the morning, I'd write these 20 statements. At one point, I got rid of my journals, but I took a picture, actually a video of them, just to show people, because people didn't believe I had that discipline. Now remember, one of my key decisions was to take care of my body. So I decided to do the Mr. Alaska Bodybuilding Contest. And the first time I did the show, the state bodybuilding show, I won the entire show. One of the things I learned is that you want to learn from the best. At that point, it was a man named Dorian Yates, and he was all about maximum results in minimum time. This is about efficiency, being a more efficient human being. So I made a decision to emulate him. And I followed his prescription for success without the steroids. And what I did is every day I wrote down every single exercise I did, every single set I did. I reframed momentary muscular failure and I called it success. There was no denying what I did. So the next time when I went back to working out, if I didn't do more, I either did not have enough recovery or nutrition, so it was the ability to do more and do more. I'll never forget the story of Hercules where he picked up the calf and then the calf got heavier and heavier. Eventually, Hercules was picking up the cow. That made sense to me. I also learned to have a willingness to do what other people are not willing to do. Because when you're willing to do what other people are not willing to do, you're going to get different results. I also learned to visualize. But more importantly than the visualization is the ability to feel it as if it has already occurred. It's the combination of the picture and the feeling. But today I believe the feeling overrides the picture. Everything comes down to a feeling. And I had visualized myself winning the show over and over again. So the morning of the show, when I woke up, I knew I was going to win the show. I prepared more than anybody. I didn't take a cheat day. When they announced the winner of the show, I put my hand up before they even said my name. Every single judge voted me first place. People thought I took steroids. I took no steroids. It was a compliment that they thought that I was a liar because I was so ripped. They couldn't believe a human being could get in that condition. The next year they're having the show again, and I felt fear in my heart. What if I lost it in front of everybody the next year? That would be embarrassing to lose it again. So then I made a decision to do it again. Guess what? I won it again. No guts, no glory. And I beat this guy that became famous. This guy was on the front of Flex magazine and Muscle and Fitness, and I came home with the Spanish sword. I was lucky enough to win the show twice. This is part of my story. Let's go back to Brian Tracy. Luck is what happens when preparation meets opportunity. I definitely prepared for the show. I definitely went in to win the show. And at a minimum, this exhibits that I exhibited a bit of discipline. And I say discipline is doing what your ego doesn't want to do. I was training a class recently, and I said I took a cold shower this morning. Why did I take a cold shower? Because my ego didn't want to. So now I had won the bodybuilding show twice. Now I'm speaking at colleges, at high schools, at middle schools, prisons, detention centers, fundraisers, and I'm practicing for my future without even knowing that I'm doing it. And then I heard that you could make money in the car business from my accountant. So I thought, I'll make a change. Yes, I went into the car business, but you know what? I did it tactically and I did it strategically. And I'm going to pick the guy in my city in Anchorage, Alaska, that has the reputation for being the best guy in the car business. And I interviewed him to see if I was going to accept him as my boss. And I knew that I was going to be the top salesperson because I knew that nobody was going to work as hard as me. Nobody was going to buy every single book on psychology on sales. Nobody was going to take the discipline I took from Mr. Alaska and put it in the car business. I made another decision after winning the Mr. Alaska shows twice, and that was to take all this energy, I put it into my body and put it into my mind. I've been meditating 3 times a day for 25 years, teaching myself to be conscious. And when you're conscious, things start happening. I started meeting these amazing human beings that started teaching me things about consciousness. After 4 months in the business, they made me a manager. After 2 years in the business, they said, how would you like to be a trainer for the company? When I said earlier that I had the journal for 10 years and I wrote down what I wanted to be as a human being, one thing I wrote is that I am a professional speaker. And now here it was, they were offering me the job to become a professional trainer. Remember, I barely graduated from high school. So now I'm writing down, I am the best trainer in this company. I'm going to every Train the Trainer seminar I can find in the country. My goal is to be the most transformational trainer I could possibly be. Here I am 22 years later, meditating for 25 years. And what I've learned is that you can change your trajectory if you choose to. And I've also learned that pain is the great persuader. The saying is that life will keep on giving you lessons until you choose to learn from them. And if you don't learn from them, life will keep on giving you the same lesson until you do learn from it. Oftentimes people recreate the same problem over and over again until it gets so painful they change. Change is constant. Change is nonstop. You are going to have to change if you want to keep your job. You're going to have to change if you want to stay relevant. You're going to have to understand how to rewire your brain and the neuroplasticity, because you don't have the luxury of doing things the same way. You don't have the luxury of the certainty of the past. In my book, Turning Snowflakes into Diamonds, Turning Pressure into Power in the Age of AI, I could see that people are going to lose their jobs to AI, and they are going to lose their jobs to robotization. Let me ask you a question. If you work in corporate America, if the corporation could do more with less, would they? If they could pay you less, would they? Probably 90% of them said yes. They are going to keep the people that are the most valuable, the most adaptable, and have the ability to fit in. And this is where you have to understand that iteration. I was talking to my class today. I said, do you know what iteration means? An iteration is like when you iterate a book and you make it better. You iterate the process and make it better. And there's a saying that founders have in business today. They call it compressed feedback. You want the feedback quicker because you can iterate quicker. And this is what you want to do with yourself. You want to keep on iterating yourself with compressed feedback so that you can evolve. The corporations are going to keep the people that are the most valuable, the most adaptable, that have the ability to fit in harmoniously and socially. It's that simple. If you're valuable enough, they won't get rid of you. If you can fit in, that's icing on the cake. If you're adaptable, you stay relevant. This is today's world. If you like my story, if you want to change your trajectory, stay tuned in, because we're turning snowflakes into diamonds.